Okay, well, I got some great stuff for you. If you read the opening paragraph of the Superconscious Mind, it says here that from ancient times there's been talk of the human mind being part of a greater mind called the universal subconscious mind, the collective unconscious, the superconscious, the infinite intelligence. In this program, we refer to it as the superconscious mind. We all have a superconscious mind that we constantly use, often in a haphazard way. It's the source of such things as inspiration, motivation, enthusiasm, excitement, insights, intuition, creativity, and all the brand new ideas that come into the world. The difference between superior people and average people is superior people use their superconscious mind more often. Average people use it sporadically. It's almost like car crashes. They occasionally bump into an idea and think, wow, that's an interesting idea, and then go on home and watch television. But people who use the superconscious mind use it deliberately and specifically. There was a story of the gods, and the gods got together at the beginning of the creation of man, and they said, we're going to create man, and man is going to evolve, and we want to take the greatest secret of success and happiness and hide it so that man can only find it when he's ready for it. And so where shall we put this great secret? And some of the gods said, let us put it on the top of the highest mountain in the Himalayas. And man will never find it there. They said, no, man is very creative. He will find a way to get to the top of the highest mountain. Then let's put it at the bottom of the deepest sea. Because man would never find it there. He said, no, man is very creative. He will eventually develop tools and submersibles that will get him to the bottom of the deepest sea. Then where shall we hide it? And they said, let us hide it inside the human heart, the last place that people would ever think to look. And the superconscious mind and the superconscious capability is hidden within yourself. It's hidden within your heart. And when you can learn to tap into it at will, you can accomplish extraordinary things. Imagine that you bought a house. And in buying the house, they said, now, there's a computer in the garage that we can't take with us, but it's a special computer. This computer has been designed by we don't know how, but it has tapped into all the wisdom of the universe. And all you ever have to do when you have a question or a problem or a goal of any kind is go down and sit there at the keyboard and program it in, and then push submit, and all the wisdom of the universe will go to work to answer your question or help you to achieve your goal. And if you had such a computer, would you use it on a regular basis? Would you be down there all the time if you wanted to increase your income, improve your health, change your relationships, repair your business, anything else? Well, you do have it, and that is this superconscious mind that we'll talk about. What I've done, I don't think anybody else has ever done this. They've talked about this in many different books, but no one has ever put it together. What I've drawn is all of the discoveries from all the different books to explain the functioning of the mind, and then I'll show you how you can use it. We've spent the entire day now talking about goals and purpose and mission. Now the question is, how do we achieve our goals and purpose and our mission at the highest level possible? And this is the key. This is the exclamation point at the end of everything we've talked about up to now, as you'll see as we go through it. So we say the following are the characteristics of your superconscious mind. First of all, it has access to all data stored in your subconscious mind. That means everything that you have ever learned, everything you've read, experienced in your lifetime has been stored away, and when your superconscious mind is functioning, it can go back into this vast treasure trove, library of your mind, and it can pick out information, any piece of information. Sometimes you'll have a piece of information, an idea, that will be from something you read or saw in a movie or had in a conversation decades ago. And it will just pop out when you're working with your superconscious mind to solve a problem or achieve a goal. The second thing is it can discriminate between valid and invalid data. Is your superconscious mind can actually bring you data, and it will only bring you valid data. The information it brings will be correct. You may have heard something or learned something that may have not been correct. A date, a time, a place, a fact, a figure. But when your superconscious mind is sorting information, it knows exactly what is correct and what is incorrect, which is why a superconscious solution is always correct, because it's always based on valid data. Now, two, it has access to data outside of your experience. It can tap into the universal mind, and all data that's available in the universe is available to your superconscious when you tune into it. It's very much like tuning into a massive receiving station in the universe. Now, with regard to yourself, the way this works is that sometimes you'll have an idea, and when you're sitting in this room, and I'll be talking about A, and you'll have an idea about B. And it's been proven over and over again that when more than two people come together, a third mind is formed. And the third mind is almost like an ether in this room. And everyone in the room can tap into this ether, just like cloud computing. You can tap into this ether, and you can have access to all the minds of everyone else in this room, which is why you will have an idea that will be completely different from anything that I'm talking about. It's just an idea will shoot into your mind like those little lightning bolts in the cartoons. You go, woo, write it down, write it down. I didn't say anything about it. People came up to me and say, you changed my life in your seminar when you said this thing. And I know I never said that thing. But she heard that thing so loud. There's a line from Emerson that perhaps summarizes this. He said, what you are shouts at me so loudly, I can't hear a word you're saying. When you get a superconscious solution, it will be like an incredible loud voice in the silence. You'll hear nothing, but it will be so loud inside of you that it'll block out anything else that you're thinking about at the time. Number 3, everyone has at least 4 ideas per year, any one of which would make them a millionaire. So if your goal is to become a millionaire, remember that the superconscious mind is trying to get you ideas to fulfill whatever it is that you want. It's interesting about the superconscious mind in that it is neutral as well. If you think of negative, angry thoughts, then you'll think of negative, angry ways to live. And you'll have negative, angry experiences as well. Mostly, however, it works when you are clear about something that you want or desire. It'll start to bring you ideas to achieve it. Many times you'll driving along and you'll have an idea for a product or a service or something that you could do that would serve other people. And you say, you know, why doesn't somebody do that? I mean, why doesn't somebody offer that? Why doesn't somebody combine music into a little gadget you carry around and listen to it with modern earphones? And why doesn't somebody do that? And the only difference between you and someone else is someone else took action on it. And then a week or a month or a year later, you'll look around, somebody will come out with that idea and they'll make a fortune. You say, I thought of that a year ago. Remember I told you about that? Why didn't somebody do that? And they'll say, yes, but somebody else took action. Somebody else took action on it. One of the hardest things of all is to trust your own ideas. People say, well, if I thought of it, it can't be any good. Because after all, it's only me. So there must be something flawed with the idea. But it's astonishing how many people have created wonderful lives with an idea that was completely outside anything they'd ever done before. It's like some people who started off as legal secretaries often become absolutely fantastic people in physical training, which you'll hear about soon. And they had inspiration and an idea, and it was an avocation, and it absorbed them, and it had interest. So listen, the ideas are coming, the ideas are there, and they shoot through your mind. Many people will carry a little recorder. Many people will carry a little notebook. They'll put a notebook by the edge of the bed. They'll stop the car and write it down quickly. Because very often, the rule is what you're seeking for is seeking for you. And what you are looking with, what you are looking at, you are looking with. What you want wants you. And so when you decide that you want something, it's time to tune in and get it. So we say number 3, it functions 24 hours a day. That means once you have programmed a goal, as you have, both a goal and a mission, a major goal, and the more detailed you write out the goal, the more the superconscious mind can just really get its powers into it. If you say, I want to be rich, or I want to be thin, well, that's got very, very little power. But when you're specific about how much you want to earn and when you want to earn it, even if you're specific about all the things you could do with the money, sometimes writing down 25 things you would do if you were financially independent really activates the superconscious mind because of all the emotion with which you charge it. Remember, if you have a thought without an emotion, it has no impact. If you have an emotion without a thought, it has no direction. But if you have a thought of something you want, combined with an emotion of excitement and confidence and happiness that you can achieve it, it's like a powerful bullet, and it activates all your mental powers. Once you program the goal in, which you have done by writing it down, it goes to work 24 hours a day. And it's sort of like planting seeds. If you plant grass seed, what will happen is the grass will spring up in a day or two. If you plant a bamboo tree, what happens with a bamboo tree? Well, if you ever heard the story of the bamboo tree, is you plant a bamboo tree and you water it and you fertilize it and nothing happens. You water it and you fertilize the seed, nothing happens for a year. And you keep doing that, nothing happens for 2 years. And you keep doing it, and nothing happens for 3 or 4 or 5 years. In the 5th year, it grows 60 feet into the air. It suddenly germinates and explodes into the air. And sometimes it's the same with a career or a goal or a book. Look at, what is her name, Rawlings, who had this fantastic idea to write the Harry Potter book for her children, working on welfare. Became one of the richest women in the world, first billionaire author in the world, and she just had these ideas, and she worked and worked and worked. George Bernard Shaw did not sell his first piece until he was 42 years old. And by the time he was 55, he was considered the great man of English letters. Books, plays, dominated the London stage and then the New York stage, and the books sold, and he was one of the most respected people, knighted by the king and everything else. Didn't sell a thing for 42 years, but he kept watering and kept fertilizing. So sometimes some seeds will grow quickly, some seeds will take longer, some seeds will take even longer still. What you do is you just have to keep watering and fertilizing with confidence and faith until the seed springs into flower. So it's working 24 hours a day while you're awake, while you're sleeping, while you're busy doing something else. Your superconscious mind is on the job. Number 4, it automatically and continuously solves every problem on the way to achieving your goal. It automatically and continuously solves the problem, one problem after another. Now, there's a basic rule that you need to understand, is that in order for you to achieve something greater than you've ever achieved before, you have to learn certain lessons. You've got to be schooled, and usually schooled in the school of hard knocks. You have to make mistakes, you have to make temporary failures and have disappointments and setbacks. This is the price you pay. But as I said before, when God wants to send you a gift, he wraps it up in a problem. So what superior people do is they look for the lesson in every problem that they have, and the lesson is often sent to you by your superconscious mind. And so whenever you have a problem, you'll get a solution or an insight to do something and do it. And it'll continually solve every problem progressively. This is all the great inventions, all the great musical concertos were all solved one step at a time, one scientific problem at a time. Poor, when you say poor, Thomas Edison did 11,300 experiments before he found the bulb that lit up and stayed lit. 11,300, but every single step they had mistakes and trial and error, and they took notes and they tried something different and so on. People say, boy, that's an incredible accomplishment. Yes, but he tried 11,299 times. Reporter went to Thomas Edison after his 5,000th experiment. It was quite well known that Edison was working on an electric bulb. The concept of electricity had been delighted, but nobody ever determined how to use it for light. And the reporter from the New York Times said, Mr. Edison, why do you waste so much time on this invention? You've failed 5,000 times, according to your own admission. He said, young man, he said, you don't understand the way the world works. He said, I have not failed at all. I have successfully identified 5,000 ways that will not work, which puts me 5,000 ways closer to the way that will work, and I will find that way. And I will find that way. He was quite resolute. There was no question that every single mistake was simply a step forward. Later, Edison explained that when I decide to achieve a goal or to invent something, as far as I'm concerned, all I need to do is remove all the ways that don't work until all that is left is the way that will. And that's how he approached every invention. He became the most prolific inventor in history. Patented something like 1,249 devices at the American Patent Office. When he died in 1931, 1/6 of American working people were working for Edison companies producing Edison-invented devices. Today we have 140 million working people in the U.S. What would be 1/6 of that? What would be 1/6 of that? Come on, 20 million? Oh, probably 23 million. Geez, you guys are quick. Okay, 20. Big picture thinkers here. So that means that Edison, the equivalent of 23 million people, would be working to produce Edison-invented devices if he was alive today. Walmart, the biggest country in the world, has 1.5 million employees. Just imagine, Edison would have had 23 million employees. And all of his ideas came from the superconscious mind, which we'll talk about in a couple of seconds. Okay, number 5, it's capable of goal-oriented motivation. Now this is very important to understand. The superconscious mind cannot work without a goal. It's just like an exocet missile, a heat-seeking missile, has got to be targeted on something. And so when you set a goal, as you have in the previous session, now the superconscious mind can really grab onto that goal and go to work for it. Here's the point is, as we said before, when you set off a missile, it's already targeted on a target. When you set off your own exocet missile, it will find the target wherever it happens to be, anywhere in the world and under any circumstances. You can just set it off, and it has the ability to seek out the goal that you're looking for. And that's why it often brings it to you in the most remarkable ways. So you have to stay really, really wide open. It's a favorite story of Barbara's and mine. Should I tell them that story? Down in the Mississippi, there's big flooding. You've seen the flooding on the Mississippi on the paper today. Huge flooding. And the water is overflowing the levees. It's flooding the country and so on. Well, this had happened in the past, and there's a farmer out there, and word came out from the National Guard, we've got to get all the farmers out of there because the river's going to overflow the banks, and it's going to flood this whole area. It's going to be 5-6 feet of water there by tomorrow morning. So they went out in jeeps, and they went all over the farmland, and they told people, you've got to get out, you've got to get to higher ground. Well, this one farmer, he says, no, I'm not leaving. He said, God gave me this farm. He gave me this land. He said, I've been here all my life. My grandparents were here, so I'm not leaving my land. God gave it to me. God will take care of me. God will provide. And they said, okay, well, we can't force you to leave, but there's going to be 6-8 feet of water here by tomorrow morning. Sure enough, water went over the banks of the river, flooded the farmland, 6-8 feet of water, and he's driven up into the second floor of his house. Well, back at the command control center, they're saying, do we get everybody out? He said, well, there's only one person left that we know of, is that old farmer. And they said, well, we're going to have to break the levees in order to relieve the flooding. There's going to be another 6-8 feet of water in that land. We've got to get the farmer out. So they sent out a motorboat. And the motorboat came out and came up to the edge of the house, second-story window, and said, get in, we got to get you out of here. There's going to be 6-8 feet of water here. We can't speak for your safety. He said, I'm not leaving. He said, God gave me this farm. God gave me this land. He said, I don't know what's happened up to now. He said, but I'm staying here. God will take care of me. And so they said, well, again, we can't force you. So they went away, and sure enough, the levees broke, and another 6 or 8 feet of water came out, and this farmer was forced into his attic and living on the top of his house. And they asked them back at the command post, is that farmer still alive? Well, let's send out a helicopter and see what we can do, because the dam's going to go tonight, and there'll be another 8 or 10 feet of water, and that whole area will be washed away. So they sent out a helicopter, and they had a voice, and they said, look, you've got to get out of there, grab the ladder, we'll get you out of here, the dam's going to break, they haven't got a chance here. No, God will provide, God will take care of me. God has always taken care of me. He's not doing so well right now, but I'm sure he'll take care of me. So they flew away in the helicopter, the dam broke that night, the water came crashing down, another 8 feet of water washed the house away, washed him away, washed him downstream, and he's holding on to this tree that's just about to sink, and he's completely bedraggled, and he's finished. He's going to die and drown. And he has, with his last bit of energy, he leans up and he says, God, I trusted in you. Why did you let this happen to me? And the clouds part. The great voice of God comes down and says, look, I sent you a jeep. I sent you a boat. I sent you a helicopter. What else can I do? Barbara and I use that story and have used it for years. Whenever something happens that helps us in some way, we joke about, is that the boat? Is that the jeep? Is that the helicopter? Because the most amazing thing is that it will show up for you. So be open to it. But what people say is, that's just a jeep trying to get me to go to higher ground. No, I'm not interested in that. Somebody's trying to sell you or encourage you to read a book or buy a magazine or take a course. You say, no, I'm not interested in that. I'm waiting for my big break. You know, and sometimes that little knock on the door, that letter in the mail, that friend who's got an idea for you, that's the jeep, that's the boat, that's the helicopter. So start to be sensitive to it, almost like a kid at Christmas. So it releases ideas and energy for goal attainment. As a matter of fact, it is a source of what is called free energy. Now, free energy is the energy that Nikola Tesla, the great electrical genius, was able to tap out of the air and light up an entire studio. He would bring people, scientists over. He would have his whole studio lit up with no wires and no connecting, no generators, and then he would show them in the most miraculous way how he could turn on all the lights by extracting energy from the air. No one has ever been able to do it before or since. But Nikola Tesla was able to do it, and which is why he's called the greatest electrical genius in history. The reason he's not that well known is because he was very disorganized, whereas Thomas Edison, who hired Tesla and put him to work to develop his work, was an extremely good businessman, very well organized, very thoughtful, and was able to take the best of Tesla's work and incorporate it into his work on electricity. Free energy comes, for example, when you're really excited about something. Give you an example. You've all had the experience where it's 2 or 3 in the morning, you're in a deep slumber, and there's an emergency. You get a phone call from someone who needs help, there's an alarm that goes off, there's a bang on the door, and you wake up, and you are wide awake, and you have abundant energy, and maybe you're up for the whole night, and then you go through the whole next day, and you're not tired at all. Have you ever had that experience? When a person, especially a woman, is getting married, she gets by on about 3 or 4 hours sleep a night, and all the rest of the time, because of the high energy in the whole upcoming ceremony, she lives on free energy. And sometimes when you're really excited, mothers live on free energy as well, especially if they have 2 or 3 young children who are incredibly time-consuming from basically 5 or 6 in the morning until midnight. They are able to tap into a form of free energy. And when you have a goal, what happens is you tap into this form of free energy, almost like taking a plug and plugging it upward into this superconscious mind, and you just bound with energy. And it's the energy of the motivation and the excitement that comes from the goal. It doesn't happen in the absence of a goal. You must have clear, specific goals in order to tap into this free energy. Now, number 6, it responds to clear, authoritative commands. What we call positive affirmations is when you say, I earn this amount, I weigh this amount, I achieve this goal, the superconscious mind accepts it as a command. It's passed from your conscious mind through your subconscious mind and into your superconscious. It's almost like your subconscious mind are the workmen in the white coats who take the command from head office, your conscious mind, your deciding mind. They take it and they pass it on to the supercomputer, to the superconscious. And the superconscious computer operators just simply put it in and it goes to work. But it needs clear, authoritative commands. So they must be emotionalized. The more excited you are about achieving a goal, the faster the superconscious mind goes into account. And it also responds to decisiveness. The most amazing thing that you've found throughout your life is that when you make a decision, that wonderful quote that Cam quotes, when you make a decision, nature moves too. All manner of things begin to happen that would not have happened in the absence of the decision. So very often you'll make a decision either to get in or get out, either to do it or not do it, to make a commitment or walk away, and that commitment suddenly triggers a whole series of activities and actions like dominoes. They just start to click. You get phone calls and you get letters and you get emails, and all kinds of things begin to happen immediately after you make a very clear decision, which means that you set a very clear goal. And writing the goal down, is, as we say, is very powerful. So make a decision that you're going to do or not do something, and then take the first step. Make the decision and take the first step. Jesus said, faith without acts is dead. Now what does that mean? Is you can make all the decisions in the world, but they're meaningless decisions unless you take the first step. And when you take the first step, it triggers everything. Suddenly you get feedback and actions and motivation and ideas when you take the first step. So make a decision and take the first step. And then you can make course corrections. You get feedback which enable you to make course corrections on the way to your goal. Nothing great in life happens without commitment. Once you've made a decision, put your whole heart into making the decision come true. Now, number 7, it grows in capability as it is used and believed in. The more trust you have in your superconscious mind, the faster it works for you. And the more calm and confident you absolutely believe that something will show up, something will be fine, the most amazing thing is that something happens. And the more you practice with it and the more confidence you have, the faster it works for you. Pretty soon it gets to the point where you can think a thing and realize it very, very quickly. You can think, I used to do this when I was first understood this, when long distance charges were very high back in the 80s, is I would visualize a person I needed to talk to on the other side of the country, and they would phone me. And I could do this over and over again. Rather than me phoning them for 30 or 60 minutes, I'd visualize and they'd phone me. I just put it into the superconscious mind, and I say, he or she will call by 11:30. By 11:30, the phone rings. And did this over and over again. And the more confidence you have that it will work, the more rapidly it works for you. It takes a lot of confidence at the beginning, but that's all it takes. It doesn't cost any money. It merely requires a step of faith, a mental step of faith. Number 8, it operates best with an attitude of confident expectancy. I told you this before, but this attitude of confidently expecting great things to happen is the catalyst. It's almost like the ether in the air that causes the superconscious mind to activate even faster. So when you confidently expect that your goals will be reached, your problem will be solved, that everything will be well, when you confidently expect it, it just seems to come into reality. And the more it happens, the more you believe it. The more you believe it, the better and faster it works. And there are many people who just get into tuning, almost like you get onto a beam when you're landing a plane. They get onto the beam of their superconscious mind, and they just stay on that beam, and they just do what feels right all the time. And they never make another mistake. And they make more progress in a few weeks or a few months than many people who are all over the place make in years, if they make any progress at all. Number 9, it operates best under 2 conditions. The first condition is when you are concentrating 100% on the problem. 100%, you're just totally focused on the problem. And I'm going to give you a method to stimulate your superconscious a little bit later. But when you're totally focused on the problem, suddenly ideas pop out. And that's why the very first thing you do when you have a problem is to write down every detail of the problem. When you have a goal, you write down every single thing you could think of that would help you to achieve the goal. And the more you write, 10, 20, 30 things, the more likely it is that something will pop off the page. You hadn't even thought of it, or you may have thought about it years ago, and suddenly it's there again. You may have pulled it out from deep in your memory, and suddenly, and that's the key. That's what will make this work. So therefore, concentrate 100%. No television, no radio, no anything else. Best with classical music, always concentrating and writing out lists of everything you could do to solve the problem or achieve the goal. And the other time is when you are concentrating 0%, when your mind is busy elsewhere. So if you have not been able to solve the goal by focusing on it single-mindedly, then walk away. Scientists do this all the time, by the way. In scientific work, there are 4 stages. The first stage is, I think it's itemization. The second stage is concentration. The third stage is relaxation. And the fourth stage is realization. Is what happens is there's a stage in life where you walk away from it and don't think about it at all and let it brew. What is the word that I'm looking for? It's called, it's a word for it, where you just sort of let it stew in your mind while you're busy doing something else. And at a certain point, the idea pops into your mind. This is taught, by the way, in all scientific schools, is you focus on the subject single-mindedly and then walk away from it and just let it go. And at a certain point, pop, the idea comes in. Go take a vacation, go for a sleep, take a nap, go for a walk, take the weekend off, get completely rested. It's called cerebration. That's the word, not celebration, but cerebration is where you let all the details kind of stew in your mind and bang up against each other until they knock off the spark of the right answer. So cerebration. Number 10, it brings you exactly the solution you require at exactly the right time. I remember I was flying back from Vancouver to Edmonton. I was going into a very, very highly charged business meeting on a very, very difficult subject, and I was just in a state of complete agitation. And then what I did is I did the quick affirmation technique. I relaxed completely, visualized that this meeting goes exactly well, exactly perfectly. And as I walked in the door of the meeting, they were both waiting for me like lions waiting for fresh meat. As I walked in the door, the answer came full-blown in my mind. And I just simply expressed the answer, and it solved the problem completely. I still remember after that, I could not believe it. at exactly the moment that I needed the solution, it shot into my mind word for word. So therefore, when you're working for a solution too, very often the solution will come at exactly the right moment for you, but it is time dated. You must act immediately. When you get a solution, let us say that you think of a goal, and the first thing that pops into your mind is phone so-and-so and ask him or her about this. And so when you get that, do it immediately. Sometimes you'll pick up the phone and call immediately, and they say, I'm glad you called. I was just leaving for the airport. I'm going to be in Europe for a month, and out of contact. And if you had called them an hour later, they'd have already been gone, and you wouldn't have been able to get through to them. Today, of course, you can with cell phones and get through to anybody. But the point is, when you get the idea, move quickly, because it's time dated. And sometimes it's dated only for a few minutes. And sometimes when you're driving down the street, you get an idea to turn off, because you see a traffic jam ahead. Turn off now. You just don't wait and say, well, I'll get there and see how many cars there are. I remember Barbara and I were coming back from up in Riverside, and we were driving along, and the traffic seemed to be slowing. It was on the freeway, 15. The traffic seemed to be slowing, and I noticed this pickup truck with four-wheel drive, and this pickup truck had slowed down and turned and went right up the side of the dirt embankment onto the road. He just went up the side, and I think, boy, that guy is really aggressive. And then I saw all the cars, and I turned off immediately too, because I was far enough back I could turn off and just go up the off-ramp, and took a parallel freeway. I learned later that there had been an oil tanker that had turned over down there. I kept driving on this side of the road, drive this side of the freeway, until I finally saw there were no cars. The cars were packed like a parking lot for 15 miles. An oil tanker had turned over, and it blocked the traffic, and people were stuck for 5 hours. They were stuck for the entire day. And I kept driving until I could see the freeway was empty, and it was empty, baby. And then I finally got back on and drove home. But when you get an instinct like that, move quickly on your instincts. Trust your instincts. Trust that intuition and move quickly on it, because it's time dated. All right? Now, number 11, it will bring you the experiences you need to be successful. I've talked about this many times. It'll bring you the lessons you need to be successful. It'll bring you the experiences, and we learn 10 times more from a failure experience than from a success experience. So here is a lesson. If you are going through, or you have been through, a failure experience, let's say a temporary failure experience, take a piece of paper and write at the top of the page, what have I learned from this experience? Or what lessons have I learned from this experience? Whether it's business or personal or relationships or selling or anything else, and then write down everything you learned. And you'll be astonished at how much you have learned, that if you don't write it down, you won't remember, and you'll have a tendency to repeat. And as they say, what does they say is wisdom is when you make the same mistake you made in the past, and because you forgot to write it down. But what happens is, when you write down everything you've learned from your negative experience, you program that in, and you'll be astonished at how many lessons you can get from one setback. I've gotten as many as 10, 20 lessons from one major mistake or difficulty in business. You just write it down. And then you review it. And you underline it. Then I have it typed so I can review it again. Every so often, when I have my investment type list, I've got about 30 lessons that I learned about investment. What to do in order to make a good investment or to avoid a bad investment. And I look at these lessons and I go, oh my God, how could I be so dumb? But it's that learning from experience that makes it possible that you will succeed greatly later on. If you don't learn from the experience, then you'll just make the same mistakes over and over. So it'll bring you the experiences. So when you get a setback or a difficulty, you say, aha, this has been sent to me to help me achieve my biggest goal. I wonder what the lesson is that I meant to learn in this experience. And my promise to you is, if you look into every experience for a lesson, you'll always find at least one. And sometimes the lesson you'll find will be priceless, and it will change your life forever. But you don't find it if you're not looking for it. So you've got to look for it. Don't turn on the TV and have a drink and say, whoa, life's a bitch, and then you die. You know, what you do is you say, hey, now that I'm tuned into the superconscious mind, this superconscious mind is working 24 hours a day to bring me to my goals and bring my goals to me. And therefore, if I've had a setback or a difficulty, it's part of the plan. That's what we called yesterday being an inverse paranoid. We have been absolutely convinced that the world is conspiring to make you successful. And if you have that attitude, surprise, surprise. All right. A good technique to use is the end of the movie technique. Now, the end of the movie technique should probably be under affirmations, but the way this technique works, and it should also be under positive expectations, is imagine that you go to see an adventure movie, and you arrive early. There was no traffic, and you buy your ticket, and you go in, and the movie is still on, and there's about 10 minutes left to go. So instead of staying around the lobby, you decide you'll go and sit down and watch the end of the movie. So you go and you sit down and you watch the end of the movie. Now, you don't know what happened before, but you see how the hero wins, the heroine wins, the villain is vanquished, the twists are all resolved, and how the movie all ends satisfactorily, and you see all this in the last 10 minutes. Then you walk out and you wait in the lobby till the movie starts again, you go back in, and you sit down, but now you're a totally different person. Why? Because you've already seen the end of the movie. Now when you watch the movie, now you're watching how they build the drama and how the intrigue begins and how one person does this and who the villain turns out to be and and you can see it all, but you can watch it like you know how it ends. You know it's going to end. It's all the danger and the disaster and potential death of the key people, but you know how it ends because you've already seen the movie. So you see it with greater clarity and with tremendous calmness. Well, you play the end of the movie technique. The way you use it is you create a mental picture of yourself as successful as you want to be. Living in a beautiful home, money in the bank, perfectly healthy, wonderful family, doing work that you enjoy. You play the end of your movie is where you are going to end up. At the end of this goal-setting process, that's where you will be. And you just play that, and no matter what happens, the drama and the setbacks and the reversals and the difficulties and everything, from then on, hey, just relax. Hey, it's all part of the movie. I know how the movie ends. I wrote the movie, and I wrote the ending. And the ending is I have everything that I want to make me happy. And so say, wow, ooh, turbulence, just setbacks. And what happens is at the end of the movie, you stay calm throughout. You just trust throughout because you know how the movie ends. And surprise, surprise, your movie ends the way you imagined. Very powerful. Number 12, it makes all of your words and your actions and their effects fit a pattern consistent with your self-concept and your dominant goals. Your words and actions and their effects fit a pattern consistent with your self-concept and your dominant goals. That means that you can be in a conversation and you'll have this impulse to say something. And you'll say it and it'll turn out to be exactly the right thing. When I'm doing seminars like this, very often I will pull, you see I go off subject or off topic a lot when we're talking. Almost invariably, the reason is because there's somebody in the audience who needs me to go off topic. So I'll give an example that may not be relevant to a lot of people, and people will come up to me in the hallways later and say, that changed my life. I'm glad you said that. I had no idea. And it was for that person. I'm getting a vibration, and I'll just give an example or a story or an experience, and I say, that was for me. That was just for me. Many of you may have had that experience already. I said something and you said, that was aimed at me. That's aimed at my situation. And so that's why this seminar is what we call fluid within structure. The structure is what is written down, but all the rest of it is fluid and flowing and changing continuously. Sometimes you'll have an impulse to say something and something will tell you, don't say anything. Don't say anything. And so you just sit silently and it'll turn out later that it was very wise that you said nothing. Sometimes I've seen in a conversation where I wanted to say something to show how smart I was, and the other person is talking, and I'm just waiting, I want to say, and then I say, wait a minute. I never get a chance to say what I want to say because this person or other people keep talking. Maybe I'm not supposed to say anything. And so I stop, and I stop trying to say something, and later I realized I wasn't supposed to say that. If I had said it, it would have caused problems. So therefore, trust your intuition. If it tells you to speak, speak. If it tells you not to speak, don't speak. If it tells you to turn on this corner or to go into this store or to pick up this book. I've had people, I can tell you, Earl Nightingale used to be the greatest voice in American radio. He did more than 1,000 versions or segments of what was called Our Changing World. He was on 600 radio stations, and he made millions of dollars. Do you know what changed his life? Is he walked into a book when he got off. He was on the USS Arizona, the ship that sunk in Pearl Harbor. He was one of the few survivors. And he was working away at a Joe job in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. He went into a bookstore and he couldn't buy a new book. He found a used book, an old beat up copy of Think and Grow Rich. And he talks about this. He said he bought this copy of Think and Grow Rich and took it home. And it told about setting goals and doing what you really desire and trusting infinite intelligence. And he'd always wanted to be in radio. And he went down to a radio station and talked them into hiring him on late night radio. He became one of the most well-known radio voices in history and an extraordinary success. He said it was because walking into that bookstore and finding that one tattered book in the bin and taking the book home. And he just said he had an impulse to pick up the book. He said the title, Think and Grow Rich, he said, he looked at it, he said, what a dumb title. And he was about to go on, and something just caused his hand to reach out, like Dr. Strangelove, you know, reach out and get the book. And it changed his life. It changed the life of many other people, too. So if you have an impulse, something to do or say, be sure to do it. The superconscious mind explains remarkable events. First of all, it explains serendipity, which is what I just talked about in a way. It's the process of making happy discoveries. Remember, there were three princes of Serendip, it's a fairy tale, who go around the countryside in the days of old, and wherever they went, people would make happy discoveries. And for example, they would go into this farm, and while they're at the farm, the major storm comes up, and the river rages, and the river washes away half of the farm. And the farmer is in despair, he said, and they're very, very cheerful. They said, well, let's not be in despair, you never know what good could come of this. And they go out on the farm, and the river has washed away the dust from a massive bank of jewels and precious stones that made the farmer one of the richest men in the kingdom. And if the flood had not come along and washed away half of the farm, they would have never found all those precious stones. You probably heard this story in Charlie Wilson's War. It's a very famous story where, and this comes from the Princes of Serendip. He tells about this old story. Is the horse, the farmer's horse gets away. The barn is open, and the horse runs away. This is in the olden days, many years ago. And the horse runs away, and they say, oh, what a shame, you have lost your horse. And the farmer says, well, it's too early to tell. There might be something good come of it. And 3 or 4 days later, the horse comes running back, and he's bringing back a whole herd of wild horses, beautiful horses. And they all come thundering back, and they manage to round them up and put them in the corral. And now the farmer has more horses than anyone else in the entire area. And the people say, boy, that's really fortunate. Got all those horses. He says, well, it's a little bit too early to tell. You never knew. You never know. And then his son takes one of the horses and tries to break it. Wild horse, break it so it can be domesticated, and falls off and breaks his leg. And they said, oh, that's a terrible tragedy. Your son broke his leg. And he says, yes, but we don't know for sure yet whether it's good or bad. And then along comes the army recruiting. This is what they do. They would go through the villages and recruit every able-bodied man into the army and train them on the march to the big battle with the war that was on. And they couldn't take his son because his son had a broken leg. They said, oh, you're certainly fortunate your son had a broken leg. And yes, you never can tell. And the army went out and got into a major battle, and everyone was killed. Saved the son's life. But the whole thing was you never can tell. It might be good, it might be bad, it might be good. So this attitude, you know, you get stuck, go to a restaurant and the restaurant says we've lost your reservation, you can't get in. So you can get upset or say, well, maybe it's a good idea. Maybe we should go to a different restaurant. Maybe that other restaurant will be even better. So serendipity means you're always going to find happy things happening in your life. But here's the one key to the principle of serendipity is the only people who find happy things or make happy discoveries are people looking for something. They're looking for happiness, they're looking for success, they're looking for goals, they're looking for something, and as a result, they keep making happy discoveries. Many business people who've decided to start a business and don't have any money, somebody will loan them a book, and in the book will be a principle, and the principle will be what they needed, and later on they're wealthy and they live in big houses on the hill, and they trace it back to that one chapter in that one book that one friend gave them when they had started off their business and they were struggling. So be open to making happy discoveries, okay? Now, the second principle, and this is really interesting, many books have been written on this, and this is all scientific stuff. It's called synchronicity. A synchronicity is the process or coincidence of events in which 2 or 3 things that are totally unrelated happen simultaneously together to help you achieve your goal. So let me give you an example here. I have my pens. So let us say that you decide, geez, I would love to take a vacation and go to Hawaii, okay? You're reading the paper, you're watching television, you see something there. Boy, it's been a long time, but I'd like to take a week and go to Maui. But geez, I can't afford it, I don't have the time off, and so on. Well, then something happens. You go to work, and your boss says, you know, you've really been working hard, why don't you take a vacation? Take a week off. Well, you were just sort of thinking about that this morning, but you say, yeah, I'd like to, but I can't afford it. And then you get an IRS check back for $3,000 for your taxes. And then your wife says, I was just talking to Susan, she works over at that travel agency, and they have this special fam trip that you can go on, and you can get 7 days and 8 days and 7 nights in Maui, and it's only $1,235. Although it would normally be vastly more. And something else happens. Now, all of these events, you see, are separate in time and space. They only have one thing that binds them together. The one thing that binds them together is your goal. So this is called synchronicity, when a series of unrelated events occur that have only one meaning, and the meaning is the goal that you set. So be alert to synchronicity in your life. It's the most amazing damn thing, and everybody here has experienced it before, but sometimes you experience it and say, wasn't that amazing? What a coincidence. You know, I was just talking about that this morning, and somebody called this afternoon. And you say, wow, isn't that interesting? Well, this is what happens when the superconscious mind works. So in the logical world, things have a cause and effect relationship. In the superconscious world, now you do this, you get that. In the superconscious mind, things have a synchronicity relationship. Is completely unrelated events happen, sometimes on the other side of the world, that cause you to be successful. Here's an example. Car sales are down for U.S. car makers. But suddenly, the biggest Japanese car makers can't get parts because of the tsunami and the nuclear reactor. And so what has happened? There's been an upsurge of sales in American cars. Have you noticed that? That would be worth hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. It may transfer people's loyalties from Japanese cars to American cars. It could save people's careers. I mean, the number of ripple effects from that, but you can be sure of one thing, is that everybody working in the American car industry was hoping and wishing and praying and dreaming for something that would happen to increase the sales of their cars. And then things happen on the other side of the world that are completely unpredictable and inexplicable. So watch for synchronicity, and the more you watch for it, the more it will happen. Events are organized on the basis of meaning, and the significance they have are defined by you and the goals that you have. It's the meaning of the events. So number 13, it contains all monitor circuits for pre-programming. Now, a monitor circuit means that you can actually pre-program your mind. And the way you do it, you remember that your subconscious mind and your superconscious can only respond to positive commands. I used to teach karate, and the karate school that I took over had been run by an ex-sergeant from the military, and he was always telling people, don't do this and don't do that and stop doing this and stop doing that. And what I learned before I took over the school is that a person cannot visualize a negative command. In other words, we can't visualize don't do something. If I say to you, don't trip, you cannot create a visualization of not tripping, but if I say pick up your feet, you can see clearly, pick up your feet. So always when you give instruction, you give positive instruction, do it this way rather than that, do it this way. Well, a monitor circuit only accepts commands that are positive. So you don't say, I want to remember not to forget my keys. So what you do is you say, remember to take my keys with me when I leave. Remember to take that out of the refrigerator before I go. Remember to pick this up when I'm on my way home. Remember to do this. And when you say that, your superconscious mind takes it, and exactly at the moment you're walking past that table, it'll twig it into your arm. Your mind, and you'll get the keys. It's the most amazing darn thing, and you've all had this experience. Well, there's two places where monitor circuits are used, and you can use it for anything. You can pre-program yourself to call somebody, to stop off, to pick something up, to do something, and so on. And the first place, the two ways where people program their minds is, first of all, with parking spaces. There are people, Barbara is even better at it than I am, who always get parking spaces. Yesterday we went to a restaurant, and the restaurant was jammed. You know, everything was busy Friday night. The restaurant was absolutely jammed, and we drove around in the parking lot, and there was not a single, even illegal place that you could park. And Barbara said, well, go up to the front. There'll be one right by the front door. Well, I had just driven past the front door, and there weren't any parking spaces there, and men don't like women to give them instructions about driving. And so I drove all the way around and got all the way back to the front door, and someone had just left from the parking spot right into the front door. I just drove into the parking spot and literally walked 6 feet into the restaurant. It was empty. In other words, somebody had been holding the space for us and was waiting until we had come full circle around and then backed up and drove away. Now, the other place that you can get parking, and by the way, I've taught this many times, the key is, do you believe that you can get a parking space? If you do, you will. The second place is waking up without an alarm clock. Is there anybody here who wakes up without an alarm clock? Yeah. What you do is you can make a decision to wake up at any time you want for the rest of your life, and you'll never wake up. You never need an alarm clock. Your body actually will start, and even I travel as many as 12 time zones in a day. I've spoken in Ekaterinburg, Russia. That's 12 time zones from San Diego, flowing all the way there via Frankfurt, via Moscow to Ekaterinburg, 12 hours time change. I can go to sleep and wake up exactly on the minute that I set my mind for in Ekaterinburg time. So it has nothing to do with time zones or anything else. And it's very powerful. Here's another thing. There are a lot of people who get colds and flus. Do you know why people get colds and flus? It's because they don't decide not to. It's really simple. I used to get speeding tickets. I got three in one trip once. I mean, that's terrible. And I made a decision about 15 or 20 years ago. I don't get speeding tickets anymore. I drive without ever getting speeding tickets. That sounds like a negative command, but it's not. And you're saying, well, I only had one speeding ticket in 15, 20 years. Is I just program, and you know what? I'll slow down. I'll end up slowing down, and surprise, surprise, there's a bubblegum car by the side of the road with the radar on. And I'll have slowed down, and the next person goes whipping past, and the bubblegum car goes on and takes them off, and go, I never get speeding tickets because I program my mind not to have speeding tickets, and your superconscious mind will tell you if there's danger of a speeding ticket, and you'll actually slow down. Now, the other thing is with colds and flus, is you can make a decision today, I do not have colds and flus. I'm perfectly healthy, I never have colds and flus. That sounds like a negative command, and it is, but it's the only way I can put it, and you know what, you'll never have colds again. People have colds because they decide to or they don't decide not to. And people, I've met people, anybody here never has a cold? Never has flu? No, never have it. Why? Because you decided not to. And if it comes knocking on the door and you have a little bit of sniffle, you say, get out of here. Get out of here. I don't believe, oh, all right, I'll go next door. I go next door, and your next door neighbor's got a cold for a week. Just make a decision never to have colds and flus. And what will happen is, since colds and flus are not caused by viruses or anything else, they're caused usually by stress, usually by fatigue, usually by some other things, just decide not to have colds and flus. And it saves you a lot of time and trouble. But anything you want, program it in, and you'll be astonished how fast it comes to you. Now, activating the superconscious mind, this is what we do. The master method of activation of the superconscious mind is solitude. Most people have never spent an hour in solitude in their entire lives. The very thought of doing it makes them very uncomfortable. And yet solitude throughout the ages is the most powerful way to tune directly into this massive mind and literally mainline ideas and information from the superconscious. And the way that you do it is, first of all, you go into the silence for 30 to 60 minutes. It's called going into the silence. Now, that means you don't have radio or television or coffee or cigarettes or newspapers or, in my case, not even classical music. You just go and sit somewhere perfectly silently for 30 to 60 minutes. Now, the first 25 to 26 minutes of this exercise will be excruciatingly painful. You will twist and turn. You'll want to get up and go something and adjust a picture frame and make a phone call. It's almost like you've got ants inside you because it's so hard to sit absolutely perfectly still, relaxed for 30 minutes. By the way, when you begin to use the taped affirmation CD, which you will receive tomorrow, when you begin to use this on a regular basis, you'll find it's very easy to relax quickly, to go into a deep state of very healthy relaxation. You'll finally reach the point where you can do it in a matter of seconds. Just by regular practice, your body says, oh, deep relaxation, bang, monitor circuits. It's programmed in. You don't have to wait a long time to go calm. So when you're sitting there for 25 to 30 minutes, about that point, you'll start to go calm, and all the energy, all the fidgetiness will disappear, and you'll just go calm. And it's almost like a bucket full of silty water. It'll sit there, and if you leave it sit there for a while, the water goes completely clear. And this is what happens to your mind. Your mind goes completely clear. And after the 30-minute point, what will happen is ideas will start to flow like a river. They just start to flow through your mind. And you don't, this is non-directed. In other words, you don't think of this or think of that problem or think of that goal. And you just focus on your breathing. Just relax, look out into the horizon, look at the picture on the wall or a flower. Some people look at a candle, but just look at it, keep your eyes open. This is not meditation. Just sit there quietly, and at a certain point, ideas will start to come. And almost like a boat in a gentle pond, the idea that you need to solve your biggest problem or to achieve your most important goal, like a little boat, just dock in your mind, and there it will be crystal clear. And it's the most amazing darn thing. If you've never done it before, the first time you do it, you'll get a result. You'll get an insight, an idea, a solution to a problem, an idea to solve a goal. The first time you do it, it'll be absolutely marvelous. And the next time you do it, you'll get it again. And every time you sit quietly in solitude for 30 to 60 minutes, you'll get ideas that may save you years of hard work. Now, Thomas Edison had an accident when he was young that he was running to get onto a train. He was selling stuff on a train when he was about a 10-year-old, and the train conductor reached over and grabbed him. He's running behind. He couldn't get on the train. He was carrying his stuff. The train conductor reached over and grabbed him by the ears and pulled him onto the train by the ears. For the rest of Thomas Edison's life, he had great difficulties in hearing. It almost destroyed his hearing. He could hear if he got close enough. But fortunately, if he wasn't paying much attention, he didn't have to listen to all the chatter going on. And so what he would do is right there in his studio, throughout the day, he would take 45-minute naps, sometimes 45-second naps. Whenever he was working on an invention, which he worked on for decades, worked on, as we say, hundreds for decades, whenever he reached a stumping point, he'd just go into a state, close his eyes, because he couldn't hear anything, close his eyes and just breathe deeply and relax for a few seconds or a few minutes, and then come out, and you have the idea. And he came up with idea after idea after idea by doing this. That's why you'll also get ideas from meditation. Whether it's meditation in the silence or guided meditation with music and imagery, you'll get ideas. Whenever you calm your mind, or let your mind go completely calm, what happens is the superconscious mind functions. It's almost like an electrical storm goes off and lightning begins to fly. There are many people who have had superconscious solutions where pages of answers and pages of ideas and even pages of scientific formulations have come to them. You've heard the story of Mozart. Remember the movie Amadeus, where Salieri, it was true story, the court composer of the Austrian king, the Austrian emperor, and he was so jealous of Mozart because Mozart, he said, would sit there and write music as though taking dictation from some higher power. Whereas Salieri would work and write compositions and correct them over and over again, Mozart said he could see the composition note perfect in his mind. And until he saw it note perfect, he wouldn't start writing it. And when it was note perfect, he would then transcribe it. And it could be played from the transcription perfectly the first time. They said he created the most beautiful music in the world as though he were taking dictation. All great classical music, all great inventions, all great insights come from the superconscious mind. All the great classical composers who wrote the most beautiful music in history tuned into the superconscious mind, and it poured through them onto paper. Beethoven, as you know, was deaf for much of his adult life. Beethoven never heard his music played. He was totally deaf, and yet he could hear the music in his head and see it with such clarity, he could write down the most incredible music in the world that would be played by the great symphony orchestras of the world forever. Remember that, what is that 1815 suite? Bum, 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 bum. Remember that? Bum, 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 bum. I mean, nobody who's ever heard that ever forgets that. 5 beats, yet so beautifully put together in the way they were hit and spaced that you remember it all your life. You hear it the first time and you remember what's coming, and the symphony is really music. And he could not hear that. He never heard it, but he saw it in his mind. So go into the silence for 30 to 60 minutes. Listen to the still, small voice within. Earl Nightingale once said, people who start to listen to their intuition, if you do, you'll never make another mistake. You'll never make another mistake if you listen to that inner voice, because the inner voice will always be true and will always be correct. So we say activating the superconscious mind, another way, is to define the problem or goal clearly. Gather information, talk to other people, do as much research as possible. Don't try to figure it out yourself. Concentrate single-mindedly on the problem. Don't try to do a whole bunch of other things. Just keep focusing on this one problem, this one goal, this one obstacle, and then release it and get your mind busy elsewhere. If after you've done all these things, gathered all the information, you cannot think of a thing to do, just turn your mind somewhere else and let your superconscious mind work day and night. At a certain point, the answer will just pop up. So, there are three sources of a superconscious solution. The first is intuition. It comes from within. And as we say, the still small voice is sometimes so loud that it drowns out everything. You hear that answer and you go, wow, geez, this is it. And you get up and you're excited. There's this famous story of Archimedes, a mathematician in ancient Greece who was asked to determine whether or not the crown that he had bought, the gold crown, had been watered down with copper or with bronze. And he was trying to figure out how you could measure the content, the true content of any metallic object, especially a crown. And he came up with the idea. He was in the bathtub, and he's sitting in the bath, and as he sat in the bath, the water level went up and down as he sat up and laid down. And he suddenly realized you could tell the volume by putting it in water and measuring the amount of water that was displaced by it. And he was so excited, he jumped out of the bathtub, and he was running down the streets of Athens, stark naked, saying, I have found it, I have found it, I have found it. And does anybody remember that story? I have found it. And the words for I have found it are in Greek are eureka. I have found it, eureka. Do you know what the state motto of California is? Eureka. And you know why? It's because when people came out to the gold fields, when Sutter found gold in his mill, he came back and he said, oh my God, you won't believe what I found. And that became the state motto, Eureka, I have found it. And that's what the miners would say. The prospectors that came out in the gold rush, when they finally found gold in their pan, they said, I found it, I found it, I found it. Eureka. And it comes from Archimedes, 2,500 years before. And so it's intuition, this intuitional voice, and I say, oh my God, I found it. This is the answer. Wow. And second of all, you'll get it from chance encounters with information and with strangers. Chance encounters. In other words, you'll just come across something at random in a newspaper or a magazine that's a piece of information that's priceless. It's the last piece in the jigsaw puzzle. It puts it all together. Or you'll meet a stranger, and in conversation, it'll turn out that this person had a similar experience, and this is what they learned, and be sure of this. And you say, oh my God, that piece of information was absolutely priceless. So be alert to it. I'm sending you a boat. I'm sending you a Jeep. I'm sending you a plane. Once you have a goal, your intuition, your superconscious mind will be trying to get the answer to you. Like a person rushing through the crowd shouting at you as you're getting away, this superconscious mind is trying to get the answer to you. Hey, I've got the answer. Listen. Stop and listen. Almost like it's a game, like it's a fun thing. And three is unexpected events, successes and failures. Peter Drucker wrote a book some years ago called Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And as Peter Drucker did in his lifetime, when he wrote a book, you could just basically throw away the other books. And what he said in this book is that the greatest single source of great products and services is the unexpected success or the unexpected failure. The unexpected success. In other words, you tried something and it had an explosive success. And you say, oh my Lord, what is going on here? And you find out that you've hit the right product or the right service at the right time and so on. Or something that you've done for a long time failed completely. And natural tendency is for people to say, wow, that was a lucky success, or oh, damn that failure. But what successful people do is they look into it. Why was that so successful? Or why did it fail? Great example, my father was an artist and created an enormous number of sculptor works in London in the 30s. And in the 30s, he was invited to join the Chelsea Arts Club, which is one of the most prestigious, like the Harvard Club of New York. The Chelsea Arts Club was where the creme de la creme, the Bernard Shaws, the top writers, the top artists and poets, the top actors and actresses went. And he said he played billiards with Sir Isaac Fleming. And Isaac Fleming was a doctor and a researcher. And what had happened was, it's an incredible story, by the way. I'll tell you the story quickly because it's so good. What happened was when Sir Isaac Fleming, not Isaac Fleming, what is his name? It'll come to me in a second. His name was Fleming, it wasn't Isaac. But Fleming grew up in a small town in Scotland, came from a poor family. And one day his father was out on his way home with his wagon, and a car came along and went off the road and got stuck. And the father came along with the wagon and the horse and offered to help him to get his car back on the road. And it was late at night and it was raining and it was a really bad situation for the driver. And so he thanked him very much and he pulled him off, got him off on the road. He said, "Is there any way that I can repay you? I'll do anything you like." His name was Sir Randolph Churchill. He was the father of Winston Churchill. And he was on his way to one of the Churchill castles. They were a very wealthy family in Scotland. And he said, "No, I can't think of anything, Gov. I can't think of anything." He said, "What about your family?" He said, "Well, I got a real bright boy, Alexander Fleming. Got a real bright boy, Alex, but we can never afford to send him to school." He said, "I'll tell you what. You come up to the house and I'll send him to school. I'll give him a scholarship. I'll get him into the right school." So he got Alexander Fleming into school, and he was... No, the story's much better than that. Oh, yes. Here's the story. The story was that the car got in a serious accident and... No, okay. No, I got the story. Okay. I got the story. I haven't thought about this story for years, but it's so good. So he said he got him into school, and he went and moved to London, and they got him a place to stay, and they kept in touch with him. And Sir Lord Randolph Churchill kept in touch. He was a very bright boy, very nice boy, grew up, teenager, went to medical school, and so on. And they invited him to join the family at Brighton Beach for their vacation. And so he did, and he was playing with young Churchill, who was about 19 or 20 at the same time. They were just boyhood friends. And Churchill got caught in a riptide and was being pulled out to sea and was going to drown. And Fleming was a good swimmer, and he swam out and saved Churchill's life. And this was in the early part of the century, in the tens of the century. And he saved Churchill's life. And boy, they were really appreciative of that. And he went on back to medical school and began working. In the 20s, he was working on an experiment in his lab, and they had put the algae dish and the culture to grow, and they went out for lunch, and they came back, and they found the culture had been killed by a bacteria that had somehow come from some other part of the laboratory and landed on this culture and killed all the bacteria that was there. And so his assistant said, "Well, throw it out and we'll try it again." He said, No. That's a very strong bacteria. I wonder what killed it." And they traced it back to penicillin spores. He called them penicillin. Penicillin spores that were being used in another experiment had blown across the lab and landed on there and killed all the bacteria. So he took his focus off this bacteria and onto penicillin, experimented for a long time, and he invented penicillin. He invented penicillin, and they began to manufacture it. He found ways to manufacture it artificially. It was very expensive at the beginning. It was so helpful, it literally saved the lives of thousands of people from every imaginable type of infection or disease. He won a Nobel Prize, and became a knight, and became invited into the Chelsea Arts Club, where in the late 30s he played billiards with my father. But now you want to hear the rest of the story. The rest of the story, when Churchill was in Egypt, he came down with a terrible infection during World War II, at the peak of the Alexandrian campaign with Rommel's armies romping across. He came down with an infection, pneumonia, not pneumonia, something else, and they thought he was going to die. And so they contacted England, and they contacted Sir Alexander Fleming. Was there anything he could do? He had developed a special, powerful strain of penicillin, which was flown to Alexandria and given to Churchill and saved his life. So the story was very interesting. From the turned-over car on the road to Scotland, Sir Alexander Fleming saved the life of Winston Churchill on 2 occasions. Once when he was young and once when he was the Prime Minister of England. Now, you're talking about serendipity here. You're talking about synchronicity. You talk about superconscious events. Think about all the coincidences that took place there that changed the history of the 20th century because of those coincidences. Now, I'm not saying that that will happen to you, especially not you, Randy, but But be alert to unexpected successes and unexpected failures, because often they will contain the germ or an idea that will change your life. So how can you tell a superconscious solution? Number one, when the answer comes, it will be 100% complete, and it will be simple. It'll be so simple that you think, why didn't I think of that before? That is so simple. It's so obvious. It's easy to implement. It will be within your resources. You won't have to get anybody else's permission or help. It's something that you can do, and you hit your like this. How could I not have thought of that? It will be a blinding flash of the obvious. It'll be so obvious that you'll just be surprised you hadn't thought of it. And three, it will be accompanied by a burst of energy and joy. The energy that you need to implement the solution will come with the solution. It's almost like the charge that you need to get up. Sometimes you'll have a superconscious solution in the middle of the night, and you'll wake up with this incredible idea, and you'll be able to sit down and start writing it down, and all the energy you need to write it down. And people have done this and written it several pages, and at the end of it, they're exhausted. All the energy is gone. They go back to bed and sleep like a dead person, wake up in the morning and find the notes. This happened with some of the greatest scientists. They found the notes that had written overnight, and the notes contained scientific insights that had never been known to man before. So you will have a feeling of happiness and well-being. It always makes you happy when you have a superconscious solution of any kind. So the law of superconscious activity says that any thought, plan, goal, or idea held continuously in the conscious mind must be brought into reality by the superconscious. Any thought, plan, goal, or idea held continuously in the conscious mind must be brought into reality by the superconscious. This is one of the greatest, and perhaps the greatest of all laws, and is the summary law of everything we've talked about up to now. And the more you use it, the more you believe it, the more it will work for you. The more you absolutely trust in it, and pretty soon you'll get onto this beam where you're getting the answers and the intuitive answers and the answers from the outside for everything that you need in life. The superconscious mind explains the law of attraction. How is it that you attract into your life exactly the right people and circumstances at the right time? It's because you have an absolutely crystal clear goal, and you confidently expect it to be realized in exactly the right way at exactly the right time. Always be open to the likelihood that your goal will be achieved in a way completely different from what you had expected. Something completely unusual will happen, and you'll achieve your goal in a way that you never thought of before. Is this helpful so far? Now, this is why we've done everything that we've done up to now, because the superconscious mind works with a totally positive attitude. When you're completely positive about yourself and your future, and you have very clear written goals, plans, and priorities, you tap into the greatest power in the universe. And what you can accomplish in the next weeks and months and years will stagger you and completely amaze your mother-in-law.